Hi, I'm just doing a little impromptu live video to show you and to talk to you about my vintage German glass beads. They are my pride and joy. They're really what got me into the business of selling beads to other designers. And so it was a big turning point for my business and for me personally when I first discovered these gorgeous beads and started selling them. And so I'm doing this live, which is a little awkward, but I don't know. I tend to do better recording myself live than I do when I make a recording. When I make a recording that isn't live, I start and stop and redo it and second guess everything I said. And so I've decided to just do this as a live video and let you witness it, flaws and all. And I know no one's on here watching me at the moment because I'm doing this from my Ava Motherwell Collection Facebook page, which does not have as many followers as the Whole Bead Show page. But that's okay. I'm still just kind of getting this information out there and wanted to share with you. So that's what I'm doing. So vintage German glass beads are becoming kind of a rarity. There are no more beads being made, any more glass beads being made in Germany. The last beads that I had made for me in Germany was sometime in the 90s. And to my knowledge, there aren't any more being made in Germany, any more of the pressed glass beads, partly because the people who knew how to do it are no longer alive and the younger generations were not interested. And partly because the glass that was used to make these gorgeous beads is no longer being made. And there's a lot that goes into that, different minerals that are used and so on and so forth. So the families that made my beads originated in Bohemia, which is, a part of Europe that isn't really called Bohemia anymore. But it goes all the way back to the 1600s, and they were the glass artists of Europe. And, through different wars and regime changes and all of that, these people had different countries that they belonged to. And during World War II, this region of Europe was Czechoslovakia, and then but the people were German-speaking Gablans people, which again is part of originally was part of Bohemia. And so when the U.S. forces and the Russian forces were sort of divvying up that part of Europe when the war was over, these families, since they were German speaking, they basically were ran out of what is now Czechoslovakia or Czech, and basically had to start over completely in a part of Germany, which wasn't really even a town. It was U.S. barracks, war barracks, army barracks. And so they had to, I have a lot of stories because I knew some of the people who were very, very young, were young children at the time, but old enough to remember, and basically they had 48 hours to pack up their things and vacate and leave. And, you know, some of these stories are of people writing glass recipes and, you know, sewing them inside their shoes and so on and so forth. So it was quite a journey. And then of course, you know, the people having to start completely over without their properties and their factories and their workers and like everything, and just starting from scratch was also a courageous and beautiful story. And basically these families reestablished themselves and started producing gorgeous beads again, and mostly in the 1950s and 1960s. And that is what my collection is of. And, you know, one of the benefits to this was that the people who were not forced to flee, you know, the people who stayed in Czechoslovakia, of course, those industries all became part of the government, and they had less control over their artistry. And so that was during a time when the glass beads that were coming from Czechoslovakia were not as ornate and unique as the ones coming from Germany. Of course, they were beautiful and they were high quality, but I don't know if people remember the beads that were made in Czechoslovakia from like in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. They were mostly single colored round beads, faceted beads, not a lot of multicolored things or things with different textures, not a lot of unusual shapes, more basic beads. Not that they weren't gorgeous, and a lot of us would love to have those now, because all those are also, you know, not being made anymore. Then in the early 90s is when the Czech glass bead industry became more of about the artistry and the individual people, and they started producing more unique things. So that's kind of like a really short version of a very long, beautiful story. And for me, so this would have been mid 80s. I was designing jewelry made by upcycling and repurposing a lot of vintage jewelry, and our sources were running out. And my older brother at the time had been wanting to learn how to make glass beads, and he had studied with an artist in Providence, Rhode Island, and learned some things, and he wanted to learn more. And so my father had the idea of going to Europe to try to find bead makers there